because up against most opposition, the Swans reign supreme, but... Gee, against the Hawks, they just can't get it done.
Well, they're normally so frugal when you look at their defence, aren't they? And look, to concede 69 points against all the other teams, that's a tremendous record to have. But they get opened up by the Hawks, don't they? 110 points. That is just not ideal. So they've got some work to do if they're going to get over the Hawks come September.
I asked you this question a couple of weeks ago, and bear in mind serious injuries to Ballantyne, McGovern and Cloak,
yes,
all of whom will play later on in the year. But I asked you the question, I think there's two pertinent ones now as we head towards the finals. Who are going to play off with the Hawks in September? And who is going to make up the final positions of the 8, Jason? That's a leading question to you.
It is, and look, it's difficult to write off, I think, the Sydneys and the Fremantles, because we know they're good sides. Those injuries are going to play a key part when they get those players back, whether they've got time to find their best form prior to the finals. We know Ballantyne's out for some time now. I mean, Collingwood lose Cloak, Sydney lose Tippett. We don't know how long for, so there are some issues there. I still like West Coast. I love the way they're playing, and I see no reason why they can't continue, although McGovern is going to be a massive loss for them.
Do you see him as being the tipping point as discussed on 360?
Well, potentially. They've got such a good system. We've spoken about the Eagles' web, of course, Gerard, so they defend really well as a team. They keep their distancing really well. I think it's probably going to be one of the Perth sides against Hawthorn. I know we've still got a long way to go, but Fremantle smashed West Coast earlier on the year. And I'd still like to see Fremantle when Michael Johnson gets back. He's about 3 to 5 weeks away from that hamstring injury. He's been a massive loss.
In many ways, McGovern the spider in the web, so it'll be interesting to see how the Swans deal with that and how West Coast cope with him. But, Jason, let's have a look at the ladder, and not just the ladder as it sits on points, but also the percentage ladder, because in many ways percentage tells you a fair bit.
It does. As a general rule, the percentage ladder sees a rearranging of the top 4 sides. And it's a very good guide in terms of who has success come September. You've got to be able to kick those winning scores. So all it does is rearrange the top 4. The interesting one is Collingwood jumps up on the percentage ladder. They come up to 5th. That's the only change to the 8, and it's Adelaide that actually slip out. But the reason we put the percentage ladder up is because it has proven a very good guide in recent years as the teams that are going to be successful come the end of the year. So there's no great anomalies there other than Collingwood come into 5th spot, having been out of the 8 last week after that loss. So I think it's very interesting, and I just love this year, I think, more than any. There's so much interest in all the positions. They're all up for grabs still. And normally we have a lot of those decided by this time.
If you're looking premierships, though, Brownie, I think if you're looking at Fremantle and West Coast, those top 2 positions where you don't have to travel, absolutely... gold, but at the other end of the ladder, you've got the contenders to play finals footy. Can we still count Port Adelaide as a contender?
Port Adelaide's gone. Put a line through them, so it goes all the way down to Geelong, number 11th there. Now, the side that stands out is North Melbourne, who's clearly got the best run home.
And the worst percentage.
And the worst percentage, of course. Now, we see Collingwood 9th. Now, their percentage suggests they should be higher, but they've had 4 pretty close losses against genuine teams, but they're 4 in a row now. And there's some real problems there. There'll be some confidence issues. Who plays forward? Does Ben Reid come in and play forward? Does Goldsack come back in and have to go forward as well? So it's probably a problem. I think if GWS beats Geelong down in Canberra this week, I think we can nearly lock GWS in, which would be a mighty effort. The potential change I see here is North Melbourne going in and maybe Adelaide falling out, because GWS and the Bulldogs probably got the best run home out of all those sides.
I want to talk to Clarko about this, but having a lot of numbers to go through your side is so important. And the one thing that GWS have got, it's a list that bats deep. But let's go back to the Sydney Swans, Jason, because all the numbers suggested that this was going to be a very close game, except a couple. And certainly efficiency inside forward 50 is one of them.
And that was the key difference. I mean, when you look at the cold, hard numbers, Sydney won enough of the ball and they had virtually the same inside 50s. But when you look at that conversion rate, once you go inside 50, 44% to 14%, that indicates there's a few issues there in the movement of the ball and the identifying of targets in that forward 50 area. So they won enough of the ball, but some of their inside 50s, I mean, that's a ruckman kicking it in Toby Nankervis.
But this is the first 30 seconds, Jason, and there were alarm bells ringing here. Shocking kick going in. No great pressure, and then this average performance here to guard the mark. Ball gets handballed over. This has to be a smother, and yet Ruffy's allowed to kick it. And it's a bad body language is everywhere. Knocked off the ball too easily. And in the second half, not much change.
Yeah, we see this too. The entries inside 50, real problem. They've got some star midfielders, Sydney, but their percentages for being able to hit one of their forwards inside 50 is really poor compared to the rest of the competition. That's a stark contrast to Hawthorn. They don't extricate the stoppages as well as Hawthorn. Hawthorn use that really quick hands, then they can release a player. Then the player who's going to kick has time and space to hit the forward, and the forward has time for that lead to unfold. But there's holes in every area of the ground, Gerard, for Sydney. And usually if you're going to be a premiership contender, you might have a hole in one area of the ground throughout a season, but they've got holes on every line. Obviously, they're having issues in the forward line. Tippett's struggling. They haven't really got any small forwards. They've got issues in the midfield, especially with the rucks, and there's issues with the defence, no doubt about it. They're having problems bringing the ball out of defence. And also a guy like Teddy Richards has come in. He's going to get suspended again, but he's been struggling for form. So, there's a few problems there, Jason.
We're talking about that efficiency going forward before. We've got some really interesting numbers when we're talking about the quality of the midfielders disposing of the ball going forward. And Sydney, we say, have got as good a midfield as anyone else, with Hanbury and Kennedy and Jack and these type players. Now, these are hitting targets when you go inside 50. The AFL average is 20%. So that's in terms of getting a mark, identifying a target, and it gets marked inside 50. Have a look how low the Sydney midfielders are. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say they're all poor kicks. And just so people at home can get some relevance to it, Brad Hill leads the competition at 35%. I think there's a few of them around Swan and Pendlebury are at 30%. That's hitting targets inside the forward 50. But I think this is a combination of being under pressure when they're delivering, but also not having the right forward structure. The forwards not finding space to create some easy targets to hit.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make, Jason. And obviously in the forward line there, you've got Kurt Tippett, who's really struggling for form. And I don't see Kurt Tippett as doing what makes him play the best football. And we saw a few years ago, nearly beat Hawthorn in a preliminary final, nearly single-handedly dragged the Crows over the line. And we see some of these. This is when he's at his best. He's jumping at the ball. He's 200-plus centimetres. Really hard, man. When he gets that big frame up ahead of the ball, it's very hard for a defender. We see 3 or 4 of these marks. He took 7 contested marks on this day. I haven't seen that at Sydney. Certainly not at a consistent level. I've just seen him more those longer high kicks coming in forward, as you can see now, and he just doesn't seem to be able to wrestle as well. Now, we see that one, he got a free kick. You like to see that doing at Sydney, but then to see these ones, he's got the big frame, he doesn't release that well from a man and get a clean grab at it. So he drops a lot of those marks that he should be taking for such a big man.
So what does John Longmire do, Jason? Because clearly from the numbers we showed at the top, they've got most sides in the competition covered, yet they haven't got Hawthorn covered. Does he have to go and attack more to beat the Hawthorns? Because he can defend and protect that score against most other sides, but surely something has got to change, and maybe you need to risk losing a game or two to affect that change to achieve what they're setting out to do, and that's to get the premiership they lost last year.
It's a really interesting comment. I think he nearly needs to say, we've got to stop being stubborn and doing it our way and saying we'll keep them to a low score, and maybe play a bit of their game and say, OK, if you want to play open and free, let's get on our bike and see if we can kick 100 points plus and put a little bit of scoreboard pressure on it, rather than eventually getting undone, sticking to the same style of play that hasn't got the job done for them.
It's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. And another challenge presents on the weekend where they're up against the Eagles over in the West. It's going to be a terrific game on Sunday.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing just how they respond, the Swans, because they've had over the last couple of years times where they've been this low and they've responded well.
Well, their forward structure might change around a little bit as well, but how well and how smooth the Eagles playing. This side, we see here in the forward line, they've just got an embarrassment of riches when it comes to guys that can kick goals going forward. We see Yo there, got Hill kicking it in there. Some of their delivery inside 50 has been fantastic, Gerard.
Yeah, their ball movement, I think, is as good as anybody's, and that's the great difference. And it's also the thing that absolutely distinguishes the top from the bottom. I want to have a look at this young kid, Jamie Cripps. Look at that. He runs so hard, he gets up and back, and he's also a great creator of goals. He delivered that one nicely. I think he's been undersold, Jamie Cripps, and he is right in the mix for All-Australian recognition in the squad.
No doubt, and he's that unique type of player. He's that mid-size, can push up the ground, but he's a proven goal kicker. He sets up goals, he uses the ball well, so I think he's had an outstanding year. It's really interesting, though, we talk about this matchup. This is the perfect opportunity, I think, of what we were just talking about. We know the Eagles can score. So Sydney, rather than putting all their eggs in one basket saying we've got to stop West Coast from scoring. Yeah. They've got to keep some forward structure. They get a defence now, which has been very, very good, but no McGovern. So I know there's no Tippett up forward, but they've got Franklin ready to burst a game open, I think. They've got to make sure they keep him inside 50 and a few others, whether it be Reid, whether it be Goods, whoever it is, that can do some damage, and make sure they make the most of those forward 50 entries.
Can Adam Goods play defence? Because I think that they've got some issues getting the ball out of defence and getting it out quickly, getting it inside forward 50 plenty of times. But can Adam Goods finish his career as a defensive wingman and giving them some creativity off the back?
I'm not sure. I certainly think he's still moving okay. I don't think his aerial work has been what we've seen throughout the prime of his career. He's not jumping at the ball as well as he has in the past. So, I think it'd be a big ask to throw him down back all of a sudden when, he hasn't played a hell of a lot there.
Let's move on and talk about the Pies because...